Hello, see this wall over here? It is the most significant, complex, exceptional, revealing, magnificent, plus a variety of other three-syllable words that I sound ridiculous pronouncing. Cyclopean wall in the entire world. That is because it is, simultaneously, the oldest polygonal wall in the solar system, but also the best built in the whole area of Eurasia. That is from Portugal to Japan, quite a big stretch of land, about the size of Mars. Two characteristics which, when combined, are a sure sign that we are missing something massive about the true story of this particular wall. Not the least because common sense suggests the first time a specific technology shows up, it should not be applied in its best form. But then, that's exactly what we are told happened about this stretch of stonework. That is both the best and the oldest Cyclopean wall. Enough mystery to investigate this whole thing much closer. The Cyclopean wall in Alaca Hoyuk, Turkey, is a mystery because it was made by aliens before the Big Flood with anti-gravity telepathic lasers mounted on dinosaurs. Yeah, that could be a joke if it was funny, and also if there were a better explanation for how that Cyclopean wall was built. But then, as we'll see, any crazy theory one can think of is nearly as reasonable as all the other ones, including the official dogma being pushed by mainstream academia, with none of those far-fetched ideas providing a comprehensive solution to the following Cyclopean paradoxes. 1. The best is the oldest. This one wall was dated officially to 1800 BC, whilst all the other Cyclopean walls in the whole world are younger, with the vast majority around the Mediterranean Sea said to be from the 5th century BC, over 1,000 years later, leaving us with an impossible dilemma on how could any technology show up first, fully formed, and then, later on, be replicated in ever less competent executions. Then, in 2, we have no idea how it was made. Truly, the hard andesite stones in that wall are fitting one to another in 3D multi-ton curved surfaces, with perfect finishing, similar only to the works in Peru, South America, leaving us with the mind-boggling circumstance of an impossible technique being invented and then lost twice. Finally, in 3, we don't know why anyone would build in this way. It is like making a sculpture inside out, with all the good stuff hidden from view. Plus, the wall is not subject to any special stress, such as an embankment. And apparently it is not even a stylistic choice, as they only use this magic on one side of the building, leaving the front in a much cruder way. These 3 forever open questions, big as they are not the only ones. They just stand out amongst the plenty of other lesser puzzles involving Cyclopean walls, such as who built them, when, what for, why did they stop doing it, how far the builders traveled to share their knowledge, what language they spoke, or what type of a hat they would wear, etc. I wonder if all those mysteries would make up for a popular YouTube channel. No, probably not. What do you think? Some academics will approach those above mentioned mysteries by engaging in their strongest or likely single skill, obfuscation, which is both a complicated word for lying and lying in a complicated way. Here's an example of how. When confronted with the impossibility of knowing how was that wall made, they point out to other rougher and simpler walls elsewhere that are fairly easy to build and claim that since both of them seem kind of similar, we can rest assured they are all equally easy to build. It's like saying, since everyone dies eventually, a resurrection is not such a big deal, because both events started in the same way. Another method for obfuscation is arguing the exact opposite of what they had said just before. In this case, it goes as saying that although two Cyclopean walls are similar, they are completely unrelated, made by different people that had never even talked to one another. Feels like saying two persons living in the same house are not related, because each one drinks from a different mug. The example with the tableware is literal, because academics also obfuscate by ignoring whatever was built in stone and only pay attention to pottery findings, leading us to suspect all those obfuscations are hiding a bigger truth, which is these walls, part different, part similar, part 3D mad puzzle, were built by one same culture, who in this area was called the Hattian. The Cyclops, or the Cyclopean builders to be more precise, around Alaca Hoyuk or in the land of Hatti are called the Hattian, and the walls they built are called Hittite. These names are similar and they seem to be another of those obfuscation trickeries done by experts. But no, this one is not the academic's fault. The people itself, both the Hattian and the Hittite, are to blame. The Hattian are responsible for not knowing how to write, and thus leaving us confused about what we were thinking, whilst the Hittite added to the mess by deciding, upon invading and conquering the land of Hatti, to use that similar name for themselves, which is quite unsettling. However, beyond their similar name and living in the same place, those two folks are also different. The Hattian are the original Cyclops, with their capital in Alaca Hoyuk during the 3rd millennium BC, until they were invaded by the Hittites, who moved the capital to Atusha. In short, in the land of Hatti, the Hittite lived in palaces built by the Hattian. I've made other videos about this and you should be checking them out afterwards. It's a theme that never gets old. And it goes like this. There was an ancient lost culture in Bronze Age Europe that I like to call Cyclopean, but went on by many names, including Iberian, Pelasgian, Nuragic or Hattian. All these cultures were related, sharing more than a particular style of construction, together with the skill set needed to build them and the mentality to endure the hard work necessary. There was also the language. Likewise, all the languages we speak today are coming from one same root, the Indo-European. The languages the Cyclops spoke were likely related amongst themselves. The Hattians would be speaking a language whose closest relation is with the Kartvelian Georgian from another Cyclopean area. This closest relative to Georgian is possibly the Iberian language in Spain, that in turn is related to the Nuragic, Taurian and Sezi, all of them Cyclopean areas. And furthermore, I am convinced this family would include the Pelasgian, the odd language spoken by the people in early Bronze Age Greece. Thus, all those sites have Cyclopean constructions and share bizarre languages that might have a common root, enough to call them related cultures. The Hittites were Indo-European, part of the group of cultures that invaded Europe in the late Bronze Age, and upon doing that terminated all Cyclopean construction. This much is not a disputed fact. Everyone, even the biggest obfuscator in academia, agrees that Europe was invaded in the past by people speaking from some variation of an Indo-European language. And eventually, at the end of the Iron Age, the urge to build Cyclopean walls disappear. What is a unique point of view proposed by me is that these two events fit one to another, like stones in polygonal walls, with the incoming Indo-Europeans being the people that replaced the Cyclopean builders, as exemplified by the Hittite and the Hattian. Like with many other Indo-Europeans afterwards, the Hittites built an empire, because that's what they were up to. This imperial spread provided us with evidence that the Hittites were not the builders of Cyclopean walls. That is because on the further extents of their empire to the south, there are no Cyclopean walls. The Hittite temples in Aleppo and Ain Dara in Syria were nice and pretty before destruction by some recurrent civil war, but did not have Cyclopean walls, thus revealing the qualified workforce building Cyclopean walls were the Hattian back in Turkey, and down in Syria there were none of them. The Hittite expanded into an area of Syria that continues to be a complete political mess, with control shifting between the nastiest people, including the Amorite, Hittite, Mitanni, Hittite again, the Egyptians failed, Mitanni again, and eventually the Assyrian. All of them spoke either Indo-European or Semitic languages on top of not building Cyclopean walls, dropping on us a couple of conclusions. 1. Cyclopean walls are not adequate for defense, because if they were, the continuous battleground that is Syria would have been the best place to build them. And 2. The Hittite, just like the Mitanni or the Amorite, were not Cyclopean builders. If the walls were built by the Hattians and the land of Hatti was invaded by the Hittite in 800 BC, does this mean that the Cyclopean walls over there are much older than what they are said to be? They could. Cyclopean walls tend to be older than they look, and that particular aspect of the baby-faced wall in Alaca Hoyuk being applied only to the smooth back side of the building suggests reuse from an older structure. But also not necessarily, since Atusha and Alaca Hoyuk are already old enough. These are reputed as the oldest Cyclopean walls in the world, enough to suggest most of the other Cyclopean walls around Europe are likely 1,000 or 2,000 years older. Going beyond the age, that is actually always up for debate, what the Hattian built walls under the rule of the Hittite Empire include is a window to the social structure, or Cyclopean politics. See, most of the Cyclopean walls to the west of the Mediterranean Sea are smallish towers, closely arranged, with one not so big Cyclopean tower per not so distant village. Although we have no idea what the Cyclopean towers were built for, we can assume they were for the patrimony of an independent village, thus implying decentralization in government or a clan-based society. In contrast, in the land of the Hatti, we have monumental works in large and spread apart cities. This represents a different form of social organization, centralized and imperial, that coincides with the population being ruled by a foreign elite. The same thing as we can see in Mycenae, Greece, where I suspect the Pelasgian Cyclopean builders were ruled by the Indo-European Mycenaean Greeks, resulting in the construction of massive city walls. This observation of the social arrangements in Hatti is not even polemic. The mainstream agrees the Hittite ruled over the Hattian. What I'm just stressing out is that the Hattians, not the Hittite, were building Cyclopean walls. Obviously, since military men don't do lowly tasks. And also that the Hattians are related to the Cyclopean builders in Georgia, which again is nothing new. What is somehow a unique opinion of mine is recognizing that the Hattians had cultural links with the Iberians in Spain, with this little detail being the only thing that separates my running theory of a lost Cyclopean culture from the official idea of move along, there's nothing to see in these walls. Remember the three impossible questions from the start? I do. One was why. Why did the Hattians, Iberians and other Cyclopean folks build in this way? And we just don't know. It's easy to see why the Mycenaean Greek and the Hittite rulers would want their palaces built by the skilled workers they occupied, but not what started the whole process of building with fitting odd-shaped stones fit one to another and no mortar. It is also pretty clear why the walls were abandoned and the technology lost after the Bronze Age collapse. Times were tough, empires were falling, cats and dogs were living together. It was absolute chaos. By the time things cooled down, entering the Iron Age, the skill was lost and there was no coming back to the old ways. That the Cyclopean technology is now completely lost is proven both by the walls of the Hittite and the Inca in Peru, on the other side of the world. We have no idea how these things were made, and all theories from space laser aliens to chemically smoothing the stones are valid. Well, not quite all of them. The only theory that is clearly absurd is the one being pushed by the mainstream, claiming there is no mystery and those walls were easy to make. Finally, the first unanswerable question was how it was possible that the oldest wall is also the best made. How could this technology simply show up in its perfect form and then decline from there? For that much, I have one idea. It isn't. I say the best wall is not the oldest. All the other walls we see around in Europe, being rougher and simpler, are themselves much older than said, not even as old as Alaca Hoyuk, but actually older than that. Here's the thing. We went as far as we could in understanding the Hattian, who they were, what they were doing, their tragic life under the yoke of the Hittite, etc. But that's only scratching the surface. We cannot, so far at least, address the bigger question, the impossible dilemmas, the truly mysterious characteristics of the Cyclopean walls, including Why would anyone devote absurd stonemasonry skills to fit stones in the interior of the wall where the work is not visible? Also, how the hell did they achieve that particular feat of construction in a way that to this day we cannot properly replicate? Not even if we ignore how this impossible work shows up on the other side of the world, in Peru. Finally, why is that the first time this particular technique appears, it is complete in its best form, with a quality fitting that would not be matched afterwards? Although this final one could have a simpler explanation. That is, all those relatively simpler walls around Mediterranean are just much older than they are said, as we'll see next in the mixed styles of Catalonia. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. See you in the comments.